Is the Google Pixel 8a still worth buying in 2025? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, and this is the Google Pixel 8a in 2025. Now, for full disclosure, I am part of Team Pixel, and this device is a gift from Google, but all opinions expressed in this video are completely my own. Now, out of all the various Pixel phones, I've always really liked the A series, and for a really good reason. We're getting almost a flagship level experience here, despite this device being a fraction of the price compared to the flagships offered by Google. In fact, this smartphone has the same Google Tensor G3 processor that's found in the Pixel 8 Pro. And that's especially impressive considering that the MSRP for the 8 Pro was originally double that of the 8A. So we're getting a lot of the same features here for pretty much half the price. Now, considering that the Pixel 8a has been out for quite a while at this point, you might want to head over to eBay to see if anybody's selling their Pixel 8a used, because typically if you go that route, you can save quite a bit more money compared to getting this phone brand new. It's not necessarily an endorsement of these platforms, but I do tend to go over to eBay and Swappa first to see what my used options are before deciding to buy a phone new, especially if it's a phone like this one that's been out for quite a while. Because there are certain people who use their phones very lightly, and then they go ahead and sell them used, and you're pretty much getting a brand new device for a fraction of the brand new price. So really at this point in 2025, I feel like this is one of the best times to buy the Pixel 8a. Now before we get too far into things here with the actual device itself, let's see what all comes included in the box. So here's the box, and you can see it's a pretty slim box, and the reason for that is because unfortunately there is no USB wall adapter included. But we'll open this up and see what all we get. And you can see here we have a USB OTG adapter, which is convenient. We're also getting a double-sided USB-C cable for charging and data transfer. And then we have a little box right here that has a SIM card removal tool. And then in the box we have a little bit of literature. But other than that, that's pretty much it. Now heading back over to the phone here. This device, as I mentioned before, really packs in a lot of pretty much flagship level specifications, considering that it's meant to be a mid-range device. For example, we're getting a very excellent looking 6.1 inch display here. This display does feature OLED, and it does have a 120Hz refresh rate. So a really fast and smooth refresh rate here when using the phone, which really does make this phone feel a lot more premium than it even is. Now, one thing I want to point out though is that when you first get this phone, the full 120Hz is not actually enabled by default. So what you'll need to do here is go to the settings, then from there, go down to where it says display, and then under display, you'll see where it says smooth display, and then make sure that's enabled. And then basically once that's enabled here, the phone will run at 120Hz instead of 60Hz. Now the only downside with that is you do get better battery life with 60Hz, but you can definitely tell the difference here. It might be hard to kind of see on camera, but things are much choppier at 60Hz. The phone still works, of course, but it is a lot choppier. And then when you switch back over to the 120Hz refresh rate, things are super smooth here. So that's probably one of my favorite features here with the Pixel 8a, is that we're getting an excellent looking display with a fast refresh rate. And you can probably also tell here too that colors look fantastic. So viewing angles are also very good thanks to it being OLED. So overall, it really is great. Now, in addition to that, the display here is 1080p, so things are very crisp and clear. We're getting a PPI of 430. We're getting a 20:9 aspect ratio, so a more narrow but taller form factor, and we're getting an 81.6% screen-to-body ratio. Now, I have done a full comparison of this device versus its predecessor, the Pixel 7a, but the biggest difference going from that device to this device definitely has to be the overall form factor. With the 7a, we had more of a boxier design, whereas with the Pixel 8a, things are a lot more rounded. For example, the corners here are a lot more rounded as well, and then the overall form factor of the device just feels a bit better in the hand. Now, there are some downsides, of course, to having the curved corners here. Basically, you're not getting as much screen real estate if you think about it, but the benefit of that is that the phone is a little bit more ergonomic. And then this phone did get a little bit of criticism for the bezel size. We are getting an 81.6% screen-to-body ratio, and that in itself is actually pretty good. But you will notice compared to the flagship Pixel devices, the bezels are a bit larger here. It is a bit more noticeable, but at the same time, certainly nowhere near being a deal breaker. Now with this device up top here, we are getting a hole punch for the front-facing camera, and that front camera is 13 megapixels. Now all the various cameras on this device honestly are very fantastic, especially for this being a mid-range phone. and I have done a full review of this phone here in the channel, and in that video you'll see a variety of different photo and video samples, but basically it does take really excellent images and pretty much at a flagship level. Now with this phone, we are getting 128 gigabytes of internal storage, but unfortunately there is no micro SD card expansion, so you are stuck with the amount of storage that comes here with the device. Now thankfully, 128 in 2025 is still a pretty good amount of storage. Now you've probably noticed that as time has gone on, apps continue to get bigger and bigger, especially as they incorporate more multimedia. So with that under consideration, it's certainly never a bad thing to have as much storage as possible, but 128 is still a pretty good amount. I would say though at this point, that's kind of the bare minimum for me. I do prefer 256, but I could survive with 128. Now another nice surprise here with this device is that it does have wireless charging, so it can recharge on a wireless charger at up to 7.5 watts. So that's a pretty fast wireless charging speed. Kind of the bare minimum is 5 watts, so I do appreciate that it's a bit better than that. We have been seeing some phones lately that charge at 15 watts with the wireless charger, but again, with this being a mid-range phone, I'm at least grateful that we're even getting wireless charging. Now with the Pixel 8a, we do have Face Unlock, which is really nice, and then also there is an in-display fingerprint sensor. So we'll give that a try right here. That works really well. Let's try that one more time. So that's super convenient, definitely appreciate how accurate it is, so all's good in that department. Now looking at the cameras in the back of the phone, we are getting a dual camera setup with a 64 megapixel main camera and a 13 megapixel ultra wide angle camera. And then with this device, we are getting portrait mode with both the rear and front facing cameras. Now here's how things look on the camera app. This is the main rear camera right now. Then from here, we can go over to 0.5 to access the ultra wide angle camera. And then with that, we can fit a lot more content into a single frame here. Then from there, we can go to the front facing camera and take a selfie. We can also crop in a little bit on that selfie. And then there's also the option here to take a portrait selfie, or if you want to, you can take a portrait photo with the rear camera here. Keep in mind though that in portrait mode it does crop in quite a bit, but for some people that's not a problem at all because it does really give you that 50mm look. And then video recording with this device does max out at 4K with both the front and rear cameras, and then the rear camera does max out at 60 FPS when recording in 4K. Now, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, we are getting the flagship level Google Tensor G3 processor. Now, the G3 has been really good. I especially appreciate how the phone really doesn't heat up too much. And if anything, it doesn't really heat up at all when using the phone, especially in hot conditions. Now, with previous Pixel devices, that's not always been the case. For example, the Pixel 7a does get hot pretty quickly. So that was a nice innovation going from that phone to this phone, not having to deal with that issue anymore. And then with this device, we are getting 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now, I did run a benchmark test using Geekbench 6, and here are the scores that I got from that test. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone, and then compare your scores to these scores to see how the Pixel 8a compares. And then with this device, we're getting a pretty large 4,492 milliamp hour internal battery, and then along with that, we are getting up to 18 watt fast charging. Now keep in mind though, that in the box, there is no charging adapter included, so of course you will have to include your own. Now make sure though the one you're using is actually rated at up to 18 watts, because if it's not, then you won't be able to actually recharge the phone at 18 watts. So just keep that in mind. The typical low-end USB wall adapter that you might have laying around is probably more like 5 or 10 watts. So just be mindful of that and use the proper one. And then with this device, we are getting NFC, so if you want to use the phone for tap and pay, to use features such as Google Pay, you can certainly do that here. But let's now take a closer look at the actual hardware of the device. Now in general, I'm a big fan of the design, just because it's minimalist, but at the same time, very practical. Now on the left side of the phone, we have just the slot for the SIM card. On the right side, we have the power button, volume up and volume down. Then up top here, we have the noise canceling microphone. And then on the bottom of the device, we have the speaker, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, and we have the microphone. And then on the back of the device, we have the camera module, flash, and Google logo. Now, even though it's nothing fancy here in the back of the phone, I do actually really like the overall look of the device. I like that it's not a glossy finish, just because it doesn't really pick up too many fingerprints. Now, you can kind of see a little bit of evidence of me holding the phone just by looking at the back of it, but certainly compared to a device with a glossy back, such as the Pixel 7a, you could really notice fingerprints. So overall, I really like the design and form factor of the Pixel 8a. Also, compared to flagship devices, this overall form factor is a bit smaller, which does make this phone a bit more pocketable and more convenient to use. But in conclusion, I actually think in 2025, this is one of the best times to buy the Pixel 8a. And the reason for that is because the phone has been out for quite a while, but we still have many more major Android software updates coming up for this phone to keep it fresh. And in addition to that, if you do want to buy one used, you can certainly save some money there. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. But this is the Google Pixel 8a in 2025. This is Kevin here, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and have a great rest of your day.